How to Ruin Your Life in 5 Easy Steps. One Man's Struggle with Women and Money by Derek Andre. At the age of 43, I began to look back over my life in an attempt to understand where I went wrong and ended up in the position that I find myself in today. Now, I am not a hardened criminal or anything like that, so get that out of your head. I'm not a drinker, nor am I a smoker. I don't cheat on my wife, nor have I been a cheater in the past. I have a great work ethic and I love my family. Overall, I consider myself to be a completely normal guy. For some reason though, I have had the worst luck with women and money. How did I get here? I kept asking myself. To find out, I began to think long and hard about the events of my past. I searched deep within the crevices of my mind and soul for the answers. As the days turned to months of me racking my brain, just before the new year rang in, I had an epiphany. What I found completely shocked me. Everything wrong in my life was completely my fault. I also realized the information I was uncovering could be a great tool to help young people who are reaching the same stage in their lives. I decided then to share a bit of my story. I was shocked at how a few simple things that I did in my teens and early 20s completely altered my adult life. What's really scary is the same dumb things that I was doing in my teens, I see young people doing today at an alarming rate. Sadly, since it is so commonplace now, most people don't see anything wrong. Well, I'm here to tell you, if these issues are not caught early on, the long-term effects will be devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, I am now going to tell you how I ruined my life in 5 easy steps. Hopefully after hearing this, you will not do the same. Step 1. Don't have a plan. In order to be successful in anything, you must first have a plan. Even if said plan does not work, you will surely fare better than if you didn't have one at all. Plans need to be established and put in place at a relatively early age. By the time you're ready to graduate high school, you should have a really good grasp of what your next steps will be. If you're planning to go to college, you should know which one, where it's located, and why you want to attend that particular institution of higher learning. If you want to work or start a business, you should know the particulars of those endeavors as well. No matter what, you must have a plan. The most common thing that happens to young people is that they have no idea what they want out of life after they graduate high school. Like the old saying goes, an idle mind is the devil's playground. Generally, if you haven't planned something to do with your life, anything that looks good will suffice. How many times has someone asked you the seemingly harmless question, what do you want to get into tonight? We have all been asked that 1,000 times. Just for the sake of clarity though, let me let you know, that is a loaded question. What usually follows revolves around things you know you don't really need to be doing. Not always, but more times than not, it has to do with getting turned up and probably will include drinking, smoking weed, clubbing, random sex acts, and for my thug types, criminal activity. None of those things will lead you in a positive direction. On the other hand, when you have a solid plan for your life, you generally don't have time to turn up or worry about what to get into. Your plan usually has your days already mapped out. Everyone has that one friend who never had time to go out and kick it. We would laugh at that person, but now they are the ones who have time and money to hang out while we're struggling with our 9 to 5. As a parent of 3, I constantly drill into my children's heads the importance of planning and having direction based on my own experiences. If you were on a trip driving from New York to California, would you just jump in the car and start driving without directions? I certainly hope not, but if you would, you really need to pay attention. We all know that if you're going on a trip, it is imperative that you have a plan. You have to know your routes as well as alternates in case you encounter any unexpected roadblocks or detours. You also need to have enough money for food, gas, lodging, and emergencies. The same holds true with life. Another thing I teach my children is when looking for a college, look outside the state we live in. Living on your own will force you to grow up pretty doggone fast. This will also prevent your mind from being dormant and hanging out with old friends and associates who have no direction. Also, always surround yourself with like-minded people and your success rate will definitely increase. Leaving home and getting out of your comfort zone will also teach you to make decisions for yourself, including budgeting your money, your time, and planning your meals, etc. If you are a teen and haven't planned your steps yet, now would be a great time to start. I didn't have a plan, so the rest of this passage is a direct result of a child trying to make adult decisions without the benefit of having life experiences. Number 2, she has a baby. Dating a woman with a child as a teenager is a subject that I am very serious about because I fell victim to that at the young age of 19. Since then, practically every relationship I've been in has included me being responsible for someone else's child. After graduating high school, I moved back to St. Louis, Missouri from Beaumont, Texas. Upon my return, I had no real plan for what I wanted to do with my life. I was 17, almost 18 years old, and as green to the world as you could possibly be. I started attending a local community college, but I had no idea what I was going to get a degree in. I spent almost 2 years going to school and sitting in the student lounge laughing and talking with other lost souls just like me. Eventually, I ended up on academic probation and couldn't go back. Shortly after that, I just dropped out. From that point on, here's that phrase again, I was looking for something to get into. I did at least have a job, but that was about it. A couple of good friends of mine decided they wanted to help me out and introduce me to their cousin. I was nice and single, so they figured I needed to be dating. Sounds harmless, right? Well, this cousin they introduced me to had a 6-week-old baby. Not 6 months, not 6 years, 6 weeks. Why was that a good idea? Who is trying to date after just having a baby 6 weeks ago? And where was the damn daddy? Anyway, since I didn't have a plan and I was looking for something to get into, thanks to my friends, I found just that. I never really thought about why this was such a horrible idea and that I shouldn't get involved with someone who has a baby. I didn't even have any children, so why would I need a ready-made family? At 19. Shoot, I was still a kid myself. That didn't stop me, and being the person I was, I jumped into this foolishness with both feet because as a fatherless child, my dad is deceased, it just seemed like the right thing to do. I didn't realize I was putting myself in jeopardy. I put everything else aside that I might have wanted to do to become a father to someone else's child as a child. Even though I had no direction, this was not the way I should have gone. This poor decision making on my part led to the beginning of a lifetime of unfortunate events. I gave up my freedom to become a daddy and I wasn't even remotely ready for the task. It wasn't as if I had planned this and had 9 months to prepare myself. I was just kind of thrust into this. One day it was just me and the next I literally had a family to provide for. I found myself wrestling with car seats, buying Pampers, stocking up on Similac, carrying pumpkin seeds, and rocking him to sleep at her mother's house. My next big mistake was quitting my job at the hotel I worked. There, I was actually paid quite well in tips, but I had no health insurance. To fix this issue, I took my infinite 19-year-old wisdom and found a job working for UPS because they provided health benefits that I needed for my newfound family. I had no idea how stupid that was at the time. Although UPS had healthcare benefits and paid $9 an hour, I could only work 20 hours per week. At the Adams Mark, I only made $2.10 per hour, but with the tips, I was making literally hundreds of dollars a day sometimes. I was so out of my element trying to make adult decisions with a child's mind. My intentions were good, but my execution was an all-out flop. To add fuel to the fire, I financed a car that would accommodate my family and applied for and received new credit cards. This was fine on my Adams Mark salary, but not so much at UPS. This was the beginning of the end. Instead of financing a car, I should have just kept my other car. As a matter of fact, at that time I had 2 cars. One was a 78 Buick Regal that had a bad engine in it. The other was a 79 Camaro that was wrecked. I should have taken the engine out of the wrecked car and put it in the one that was not wrecked. But no. Again, I wanted to get a car that would accommodate my new family. So I bought a 4-door Mazda 323. I had the down payment money, but I didn't have enough credit yet, so I drugged my mother into my mess and asked her to co-sign the loan for me. Now, I had 2 credit cards, Famous Bar, and a Jackers Jeweler card for the engagement ring I got from my then girlfriend, and a car note. I was digging myself into a hole for a girl I barely knew and a child that wasn't even mine. After switching jobs, the struggling really began. I went from making anywhere from $100 to $300 a day to about $100 a week, give or take. But I had benefits, right? Oh, by the way, benefits only work on your biological children or your wife and stepchildren, not your girlfriend and her kid. So the job change was done for absolutely nothing. Well, almost, because now she was pregnant with my child. Or is she? 3. Having kids too young. At this point, about 2 years have passed and I'm 21. I'm about to have my first car repossessed. My credit cards are maxed out and about to be closed due to non-payment. I am making pennies compared to what I was making, and now we find out she's pregnant. I am torn between joy and horror. My world is crumbling around me, and now I find out that I have my own baby on the way. I needed a second job. I had a cousin who was a manager at JCPenney's, and he was able to get me hired. Now I am working 2 jobs trying to provide for my girlfriend and our 2 children. I am working around the clock and still making very little money. Finally, the baby comes, and it's a girl. I'm actually pretty happy. At least I was until I found out my girlfriend was cheating on me. My entire world was rocked. Here I am, working my butt off to provide for my family, and she's cheating on me. Needless to say, we broke up. Here's the thing though. When you break up with a female and you have a baby together, that baby still has to be provided for. Hello, child support. By this time, I had worked my way up at UPS to become a supervisor. Sounds great, right? Finally, a glimmer of light in this otherwise dark cloud. Well, here's the deal with that little gem. When I was loading trucks, all the supervisors were telling me that I was good enough to take the test and become a trainer. For the hours they worked, they actually made decent money. It was still roughly 20 hours per week, but they were making like $2,500 a month. That would have been a major come up for me. Needless to say, I jumped on the opportunity. What I didn't know was that they changed the process to figure out how new supervisors made their salaries. It was now based on years of service and some other criteria that I did not meet. So to make a long story short, instead of me coming in making $2,500 a month, I was only making about $1,000, and we're only paid once a month. By the time they deducted taxes and child support, I was doing good if I had $300 left. I was a supervisor making less than the people I was training. I couldn't work overtime and get paid because I was a salaried employee now. I also couldn't go back to loading trucks. I was screwed again. This went on for about 2 years. I had a new girlfriend and I was still taking care of my daughter. That is, until I found out that she wasn't actually my daughter. Yep, that's right, the kid belonged to the guy she was cheating on me with. I'm 23 now. My money is gone, my car is repossessed, and my credit is shot for not 1, but 2 kids that weren't even mine. No worries though, because now my current girlfriend is pregnant. Oh, and by the way, that money I paid into child support for a kid that wasn't mine, I never saw that again. That was chalked up as a loss. I didn't miss a beat though, because after one case closed, another one started because that relationship I was in ended too. And this time, I did have a child. Number 4, sex is not a relationship. It's a few years and girlfriends later now, and things have began to improve a bit. I had gotten into the electrician's apprenticeship and was actually starting to make a decent living. My son was living with me full time, and I was hanging tough. I was about 26 or 27. Even though I had to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy to try to get that repossession and credit card debt off me, I was okay. I had a nice place to live. I was good. My son was in a school Easter program, and it was being held at an area recreational center. As the program was ending, I saw a young lady walking up the aisle to exit the building. We smiled at one another, and that was that. Shortly afterwards, my son and I were leaving, and as we entered the parking lot, there was a little blue car coming towards us. As it approached, it began to slow down. Inside was a young lady I exchanged smiles with while we were inside. We talked for a second, exchanged numbers, and went on our merry way. Later that evening, my phone rang, and it was the chick I met at the program. We talked a bit, but there was no real fire, until she bluntly said that she wanted to have sex with me. Now remember, we had just met earlier that day, so when she said it, I was really caught off guard. I asked her to repeat it, and much to my surprise, she said exactly what I thought she said. I was dumbfounded. I was also turned off and turned on at the same time. I knew we didn't have much in common, but once she said that, the whole pace of the conversation changed. We talked about it for a while, but I thought she was just bluffing, so I didn't really egg her on. Well, about a day or so later, she called me as I was driving home from work and made the same proposition to me. But this time, I called her bluff. She asked me if I was going to let her do what she asked. Ignorantly, I said yes and gave her my address and then continued home. When I arrived, she was already there waiting. I knew from the start that we really didn't have anything in common, but I was looking for something to get into, and she made it easy. I never expected anything to become of this, but before I knew it, we were somehow in a relationship. She was very persistent, and every time I looked up, she was at my house. A situation that should have never happened turned into a relationship. We struggled for almost 3 years to try to make something out of nothing until I finally got to the point that I couldn't take it anymore and called it quits. She was a sweet person and the sex was great, but she was just not right for me. Fortunately, there were no children brought into this particular situation, but I did learn a valuable lesson. Sex. I repeat, sex is not a relationship. I don't care how good it feels or how often you can get it. Sex is not a relationship. If you attempt to build a relationship and it is strictly physical, I promise you, at some point, it will come crashing down around you. There were warning flags flying all around me from the first conversation, but I ignored them all. I should have never entertained her offer for sex on the first conversation. How stupid is that? If she had said that to me, how many others had she said it to? Her propositioning me so early should have been the end of that conversation, and no relationship should have ever developed. I will never get those years back, nor will she, and lost time is a tragedy. The other sad thing is we had children involved. Her daughter called me daddy, and I had to walk out of her life. What did she do to deserve that? She became another casualty of the bad choices by grown-ups. Number 5. Finally had a plan, but didn't stick to it. The year is 2000. My sister had just moved to St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands the year before. My mother, uncle, grandfather, and son went to visit for 8 days. I fell in love with the island instantly. I knew the moment I exited the plane that this would be my new home. When I returned to the States, I began to plan my exit strategy. My first thought was to leave the following year, but I had just recently released my first poetry book, and I wanted to promote it more. I also needed to secure my son back with his mother until I could move and get settled in and send for him. I was a journeyman electrician making a really good living, but that didn't matter. I was hell-bent on leaving dreary old St. Louis behind. I was ready to make a positive change in my life and finally do something I wanted. I had pretty much recovered from the disasters that happened to me in my teens and 20s. Although my son's mother and I were not together, we were somewhat able to get along for the benefit of our child. I was amped and ready to go. My mother had just moved there in 2001 on her birthday, and I was going to do the same thing the following year on my birthday. Everything was going smooth. My plans were coming together and the days, weeks, and months were passing by quickly. To help time pass even quicker and be certain of my decision, I went and spent a month there and was sold for sure. It was a done deal. I wanted to stay then, but I had a plan and I wanted to stick to it. When I returned to St. Louis, I went on a book tour with some fellow poets. We had a great time and sold lots of books. Things were going great. By the time the tour was over, it was July of 2002, 3 months until my departure. One afternoon, I was sitting in the spot where I did poetry. It was a cafe and bookstore. I was having a conversation with a good friend when a young lady walked in to purchase a book to read while she was at the hair salon a few doors down. I thought she was very attractive, so I went over and struck up a conversation. We talked for a bit and exchanged information. She left and I went back to talking to my friend. About 2 weeks later, she called. We talked like we had known each other for years. Now keep in mind, I am moving out of the country in 3 months. I have been planning this trip since my return from St. Croix in 2000. But the more we talked, the more we began to like one another. Check this out though. She too had a son who was just turning 1 and she was 10 years younger than me. From past experiences, this should have been 2 red flags, but unfortunately, I didn't see it as such. Her conversation was great. We had a lot in common, and even with the age difference, she seemed mature, so I thought we were all good. Now here's where the mistakes began. My plan to move was well planned out, but it only included my son and I. I knew what it would have taken to provide for us, so we were set. I did not factor in 2 other people. See, before I left, I asked my girlfriend, because we had already made it to that point, to join me in St. Croix. She couldn't leave when I left, so we decided that she would come in June of the following year. I explained to her that it would be tough starting out, but we would be okay once we got settled. What a miscalculation that was. I left on schedule in October and woke up in St. Croix on my birthday just as I had planned. My new island home was fantastic. I had saved enough money to hold me for a while, and since I was crashing at my mom's until my new family arrived, things were cool. I knew that if I timed it right, my cash would start to get low around the time they were coming, and then I could start drawing unemployment, which would last me quite a while. By the time that ran out, I figured I'd have found work by then, or my publishing business would be fully up and running. During that period, I did a very good job of living within my means. I was able to do pretty much what I wanted to do and still send my girlfriend and son gifts and money. In February, she came to visit for Valentine's Day, and when she left, she had more luggage than she arrived with. We had planned to go to the courthouse while she was there to get married, but we decided that we wanted a wedding instead. When she came back that summer, she had my son, her son, and our unborn child with her. We got married in July, and our daughter was born in November. From there, we lived happily ever after. Cute story, right? Wrong. This is called How to Ruin Your Life in 5 Easy Steps, so you know there is no happy ending here. Let me explain to you why it was so wrong. First off, she was entirely too young for me. I was 33 and she was 23. Although we had a lot in common, she lacked certain life experiences. Even though she had gone to school and gotten her degree, nothing could fill the decade-wide age gap. Second, she had a child that was just turning 1 when we met. Although I loved him, and still do, I should not have taken on that responsibility again. My son was 9, and in 9 more years, he would have virtually been an adult. With this situation, I was starting over from scratch with young children. That was just dumb. The third thing was, we got pregnant, and even though we did get married, we never had a chance to at least try and enjoy one another to see if the relationship was going to work at all. We were now forever connected to one another no matter what the outcome would be. The most important mistake I made goes all the way back to my first story. Have a plan and stick to it. I had a plan, and a well thought out one, but I did not follow my own advice. This was supposed to be a new beginning for my life in my new home with my son. I had finally left St. Louis behind, something that I had been planning since my return from Texas in 1988. I was supposed to not just create a new chapter, I was supposed to create a whole new book for myself. Instead of following my plan, I completely deviated from it and brought a piece of the very place I wanted so badly to get away from with me. Little by little, things began to unravel more and more. The next thing I knew, I was back in St. Louis, divorced, a new baby, unemployed, homeless, fighting with child support, and broke. All because I didn't follow the plan I made. Conclusion. These are just a few examples of how I screwed my life up. They weren't intentional, I was just unaware. I know now, and I am trying to share my experiences with you so that you don't have to suffer. Listen, life is short. Why knowingly do dumb things that will follow you until your dying days? Why not think first and listen to the wisdom of your elders? Not all lessons have to be learned the hard way. Some can be taught through the experiences of others. If you want to go and have a baby, do it the right way. The biggest injustice you can do to your unborn child is to bring them into this world and you be unprepared. How many of you know, or how many of you are a product of a household where the children all have different dads? People don't even know you're related to your siblings because you all have different last names. Before you ever think of having kids, you should be secure. Then look for a husband or wife, and then after that, consider having children. You should learn some life skills, such as how to manage money, understand your credit, how to cook, clean, and do laundry for yourself. These skills are for your benefit. From the time you graduate high school, your goal should be to improve on the life skills you should have started learning as a child. If you wait until you have a job, car, credit cards, home, etc. to decide how to use and maintain them wisely, your life will have passed you by and the struggle will be real. Success is a learned skill that is taught to you at an early age, practiced through your teens, and mastered into your mid-20s. By the time you're in your late 20s, early 30s, you should be mature enough for life and a family. When you're young is when you retain the most knowledge. You can learn things later in life, but then you have to break the bad habits you've learned first. Schools should teach these life skills, but our educational system is not designed for that. Their goal is to create generation after generation of zombies and slaves. That is why Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, mainstream music, and mainstream television are so prevalent. Their number one goal is to dumb you down. There is a bigger plan at work, and your being prepared is not part of the equation. Okay, I just showed you how I ruined my life in 5 easy steps. You don't have to do the same. If you will, let me offer you some really simple advice on how to bypass all these issues and live a good life in 3 easy steps. Learn, plan, and think.